Cocktails presented by Data.World. I'm sure many of you are longtime listeners. We're excited here to be both in Austin as well as somewhere else. You'll find out in a second. This is the honest, no BS chat about data. I'm Tim Gasper, longtime data nerd, product guy, customer guy, joined by co-host Juan Cicada. Hey, Juan.
Hey, Tim. I'm Juan Cicada, principal scientist at Data.World. And as always, it is a pleasure to spend the middle of the week, Wednesday, end of the day, towards end of the day, or really end of the day where we are, and just spend the time at Chat Data. And I am, if you see the background, we're in this weird place. We're actually in a castle in the middle of nowhere, Germany. And I'm super excited to be with Paco Nathan, evil mad scientist.
Yeah, perfect.
Evil mad scientist, Paco Nathan. And if you don't know who Paco Nathan is, just look him up because you're a little busy now. And we owe a lot to the stuff that Paco's been doing. Anyways, Paco, how are you doing? It's great to finally have you here in the podcast.
It's great, Juan. Tim, thank you very much. I'm really looking forward to this. Also, we're having a fantastic time here at Dextral. This is great. This is my first time here.
So let's kick it off. So what are we drinking and what are we toasting for?
Okay, so this is Serre. It actually comes from a part of Italy one of our colleagues is from. And it's a little fruity, but it's got some legs to it. And if you let it open up, you'll do it.
This is Susu Maniello is the grape that we're having right now.
Yeah.
And we are in a place called Dachstuhl, which is a castle probably like 3 hours south from Frankfurt, and we're here just to kind of get ourselves immersed. A group of like 40 people to talk about the future of knowledge graphs, and that's what we're doing here. And we have a lot to talk about today, not just about knowledge graph, but also about just open research and innovation and open source and so forth. Tim, how about you?
Hey, I am drinking something a little less classy. It is a Dale's Pale Ale. Very tasty and light pale ale. Very good. And I'm actually hanging out in Austin, Texas. I have strong FOMO for, the event. I know, Juan, you go there quite often. Very cool event. But I'm here at the Capitol Factory in Austin, Texas. We're doing our sales kickoff. So it's been a great day, very energizing kickoff to the year. And cheers to being able to hang out with great people in person. It's truly a wonderful experience.
Cheers to that. Cheers to that.
Cheers. Is Dale's local from Austin? Is that a microbrew there?
I forget if it's based in Austin or not, but I know that they have a pretty strong presence here, and a lot of people like their beer around here.
Ah, cool. I lived in Austin for almost 20 years. My spouse is from there, but I've lost track of like the microbreweries. So
there's a lot changing.
So warm-up question. We should also toast that it's your birthday.
Yes.
Happy birthday.
Thank you very much.
Happy birthday.
So warm-up question. What's your favorite birthday celebration you ever had?
Cool. Well, I want to do something special when I turned 50. This was actually a while ago, but I want to do something special. So I invited friends and family from around the world. And we set up, I was born down on the Central Coast of California. So right around where my parents lived at the time, there's this great state park. It's called Montana de Oro. And it's got these amazing sand dunes and tide pools and everything, and some pretty good surfing too. So I invited friends over, and we just had this party like way out in the middle of nowhere, out in the sand dunes. And I figured that was the best way I could come up with of celebrating my 50th.
Hey, how about you, Tim? What's your favorite birthday celebration?
That sounds awesome. That's a great question. Probably about 6 or 7 years ago, there was a surprise party that my wife threw for me, and I totally got caught off guard. That was a lot of fun. When you have no idea, that's kind of fun.
So I did mine for my 30th, which happened right at the end of one of the main conferences that I go to, the Semantic Web Knowledge Graph conference every year, and this has been my community, which a lot of the folks are here right now this week, and they're my friends. And so we organized, the conference was kind of near New York. So we just rented a house in New York. And I think like 20 people came over after the conference, and we just hung out and had so much fun in New York City. That was a great 30th birthday. I'll never forget that. So anyways, well, let's kick it off. All right. Okay. Honest, no BS. What's the state of just bringing innovation from research and bringing it, translate it to the real world, and how does open source play the role in all of this stuff? Because I know that's a lot what's on your mind.
Yeah, that's what's on my mind. That's what I try to do. Our team is doing. I have a lot of background working in open source, so some projects way back in ancient history like Hadoop, but also like Spark and I've done a few other things on some other projects, maybe not quite as big of changes, but definitely done a lot of work with Project Jupiter and a little bit with Spacey Pipelines and with Ray. And anyway, I think there's a lot of room for open source and machine learning in general. And right now, because we're seeing so much going on in AI, I think that definitely open source models like you're seeing on Hugging Face leaderboards, it's really amazing. And I love that whole ecosystem. One of the things, though, is, I mean, Jan LeCun actually writes about this, that one of the things that's different about computer science, especially machine learning, is that years ago, LeCun convinced the people at NeurIPS to get the papers released open so they could do some data mining on it. And the publisher was like, yeah, we don't make any money off those anyway. Sure, you can have them. Go ahead and publish them. And so NeurIPS turned its papers open, and that's been a thing. Now we have, of course, Archive and others, but it's been a thing, especially in machine learning, where you get a lot of preprint, right? And there's not these like paid journals that are gatekeepers that really do a lot of damage in some other fields. I'm not going to name any names, but I mean, computer science, machine learning especially, I think really benefits by having a much, much more open process. But preprints by nature aren't peer reviewed. And so the flip side of that is you get a lot of stuff published and maybe the reproducibility rates on this are pretty low. So one of the things that we do for, one of our customers does a lot of investment in AI research at top tier schools. And they're very interested in the results that come out and open source implementations of what comes out, how this can be brought to bear on industry use cases. But there's a long road between, you know, a paper being published and something being deployed in a production cluster. And there's a lot of other really super amazing work that's going on right now. And there's a lot of great open source. One of the things that I would throw out there just for discussion, I had a little bit of a debate with a friend in DC recently who works at a large defense contracting firm. And their view of the world is like, research is research. Somebody writes a paper, they're done. They have no further involvement. And I was saying that, you know, really in machine learning right now, that is just not the case. The lines are totally blurred. People will do research projects. It will go out into GitHub or Hugging Face or wherever. A lot of people will start to use it. There's not this like separation, throwing things over the wall from like research to dev to commercial production. It's just all blurred. If you want to be using really interesting stuff that, you know, probably the paper is only a few months old anyway. So I think that the model that a lot of people like in certain circles in DC are operating off of, I think that we've moved past that. I think the speed of what's going on in AI right now has just blasted past that, and DC is still struggling to try to catch up. We, in industry, if we want to be using really interesting natural language, machine learning, knowledge graphs, etc., I think that we need to depend on what's coming out of research. There's a lot of great open source. And you know, the impetus for this is that the reproducibility rates in machine learning are so low. I mean, I'm not going to harsh on people, but I mean, the rates of like code being published along with the paper, that's already low. And then the rate of like being able to install that code is fairly low. And having the code actually run without exceptions is low. And then having the sample applications reproduce what was published in the paper, that's like almost non-existent. So the thing is that I think there needs to be more attention paid to this because, again, these pipelines are collapsing. And I'm not going to harsh on someone who's, you know, getting their PhD. This is maybe their first time being lead author on a paper. You know what? They've made an accomplishment, and more power to them. I'm not going to harsh on them. But you know, somebody who's in a well-funded top-tier tech lab, they're publishing. They're saying, "Here's our code. Here's what it does," and the code doesn't run. There's no excuse for that. And the same thing, somebody who's a computer science assistant professor, you know, they know the game, right? If they're publishing stuff and it's not reproducible, I can see that there could be edge cases, but generally speaking, no excuse. So that's where I'm calling BS.
Whoa, that's a lot here, and I think that this is so several points to unpack. One is it's interesting to go see how computer science has evolved, and I think I agree with you that today. Research papers come from machine learning, AI, a lot of the stuff that comes from NeurIPS and stuff. the people writing papers and generating code and that stuff that you're like, if you really want to go innovate, I mean, you need to start using that today because that's the latest stuff, right? And before there was like all these gaps, right? It was like, you have to go all these steps and people would see it as there's a big separation. I think now, as I agree with you, that's blurred. And I love how you're calling out the BS here is like, well, okay, that doesn't, it's okay if for some cases the code may not be great either, but the majority of cases right now, especially if like the big companies and the people who have a lot of experience are actually pushing this stuff out, they are just generating crappy code. I mean, just very poor experience. So wait, why is that? Is people just out there to go just get their names out, get the fame out, or they're like,
why is this happening?
I mean, I think that, you know, probably the biggest, I mean, we have spent a lot of time looking through a lot, especially in LLM space, but also knowledge graph space in general and natural language and some other adjacent areas where we have a lot of interest. We've spent a lot of time on our team looking through all of this that we could find that might be in category that might be useful and vetting it. And we've come up with a rubric, which it's in a paper that's in production right now, or in draft right now. But we've come up with a rubric to try to score, you know, like when we encounter some code, here's a checklist we want to go through to really see, is this something we want to commit? I mean, hey, if it's on GitHub, we can do PRs too, but is it really worth it to like spend the time if it's not going to produce anything? You know, is it a dead end basically? And I think you can figure that out pretty quickly. And the thing that comes across most strongly to me is that, you know, so many people are chasing benchmarks. And so they do their thing, they write some command line code that will like show that benchmark. They publish the paper. Here's our F1 scores in a table. Look, ours is bold in this one row. And like, that's their conclusion, done, right? And, you know, the code is on GitHub, but it only does that one thing. And yeah, I get it. Okay, that's like paper mills, right? That's a way to get your paper published, but it's not a way to do computer science.
Okay, so this is interesting because I'll take some bait here about benchmarks because that was something that we did recently from our lab. So the two things I mentioned. So I think one of the things that happened with benchmarks is that it really drives. We want to push the status quo, and that's a way of measuring. Have a way to go measure this, right? But the thing is that we get so obsessed with the benchmarks, and then what happens is that the focus is not about actually solving the problem. The focus ends up on being how I can get better numbers on that benchmark. Now, ideally, you are accomplishing both.
Yeah.
But then what happens is that you you focus too much and then over-engineer for the benchmark. So I think that is one of the stuff that we need to call out. And I think that I'd argue that's kind of just historical, always in computer science. But one of the things that happens, folks, in practice, in what I call close to the real world, is like, you should not, you need to be critical, right? Don't just take let's like, oh, we're going to go take a benchmark and look at the latest tool, the latest model, whatever it is. And like, that's it. And we're just going to take the top one because that's the best one and go with it. Like, no, you gotta, there's people are over engineering to that. So and I agree with you. Like, this is the stuff that I find extremely annoying. And just to kind of, I mean, not in a salesy approach, is a kind of really research thing, is what we did for people who have been following our work on our knowledge graph benchmark of large language models and knowledge graphs to do question answering over enterprise SQL databases is that you would see existing benchmarks, specifically text to SQL benchmarks, and you look at these numbers and it's like 97% accuracy. People are like, oh, wow. Text to SQL is a solved problem if you would look at that benchmark because you hit 97%.
For those cases,
well, exactly. So you've now focused so much on the benchmark and you focus your techniques to get better numbers on that benchmark. And we're like, this cannot be true. And then when you look at the benchmark, it's like, oh, this is disconnected from the real world. This is not how these schemas are. These are not what. So then, I mean, that's why we decided to create another benchmark around that. And I know that what's going to happen is that people are going to go focus on those questions that we did on that schema we did. I'm like, and honestly, like we're going to continue working on the benchmark, but that should not be the focus of everybody's. Like, our goal here is now to improve this benchmark, improve our scores on the benchmark.
Well, I mean, it can be done better. I mean, I think case in point. Okay, so there's a great paper about LLMs in knowledge graph construction. If I'm pronouncing correctly, Shen Lunadong.
Lunadong, yeah, Lunadong
Lunadong's
from
paper. I think I've introduced her at a conference before. Lunadong's paper, quotes like NER that right now it's mediocre because it's running F1 scores between like 0.85 and 0.95. But when you actually go out and look at what's available, there's Luke is like the state of the art for research, but it really requires a lot of GPUs. It's running F1 scores on average of about 0.95. But Tom Harrison, who, full disclosure, I've worked with on a couple of open source projects. He's now at Hugging Face. He's a fellow at Hugging Face. For his master's thesis, he did something called Span Marker, and it runs on CPUs, and it's running consistently like average of the same benchmarks, like 0.95, right? But it's production quality software, and it's using Hugging Face transformers to be able to download efficiently the weights and biases. So you can like pick the model and bring it down, whereas like everything else is just a disaster in terms of loading models. But like Tom really took the effort to make a general purpose research and production platform for NER that is, comparable with research state of the art, but runs on CPUs and runs efficiently. And I mean, I look at that paper and it's like, this is a master's thesis. Why aren't the PhD papers this good, right? I mean, clearly it can be done. It can be done in a short amount of time, and it can be done well. And so I do think that there are counterexamples for all the criticism I have. But on the other hand, I do see stuff that's just train wrecks, and I think it's important to call out the people who are doing it well and give them support and integrate those projects and promote them and star them on GitHub and Hugging Face, but also reference them in your papers and your talks and whatnot, and really call it out.
Yeah. What would your recommendations be to folks who are doing research, right? Whether they're at large institutions or if they're, in academia, to do better? You called out, reproducibility. You called out, focusing on maybe some of the wrong problem sets, like, over focusing or over fixating on benchmarks and things like that. What are some recommendations you would give to the research community on how we can, how we can do better for everyone?
Well, I will paraphrase from Andrew Ng, but also just looking at what's been happening on the leaderboards for open source LLMs on Hugging Face over the past 2-3 months, it's basically DPO, right? That's the message. And so the idea is that the data...
Sorry, DPO.
Direct preference optimization, DPO, yeah, as opposed to...
Direct preference optimization.
Yeah. I hope I'm... it's as out of Stanford NLP. I know Chris Manning and Dan Jarevsky were some of the senior authors. I forget the lead author. But it's a beautiful paper. And Andrew Ng said that this is one of the only times in his life when he finished reading a paper and immediately wanted to give it a standing ovation. I mean, it's that good. And seriously, go read it, because this is like how to publish research. But the thing is, the takeaway on DPO is we now have tools to go in and measure the data, measure the training sets, measure the benchmarks, measure the evals, and figure out where the problem, how are those problematic, before you spend all the money like blowing carbon in the atmosphere with a GPU cluster. And when you look at what's been happening on Hugging Face leaderboards, the message is very clear. You take like Argilo was one of the first ones. In full disclosure, I've been with Argilo for 7 years. One of Oscar's students, Denis.
Oh, yeah, okay.
But also Snorkel followed up with the same thing, and Hugging Face has done its own using DPO. And the message is this: like, take a model that's getting some real traction, like Zephyr, and go in and look at the data that's used to train it. Look at the evals and find out where the problems are there. Fix them. Get rid of the bad data that's working across purposes. And then DPO is a way of basically doing a synthetic, using human input, but then coming out with a synthetic data set that's rebalanced. And so go in and like retrain using the better data. And so I'm attacking the benchmarks, saying that we have tools to be able to go in and figure out why they're bad. Like, I'm not saying that every benchmark is bad. I'm saying actually we could improve them. We have other tools as well. If you look at like David Gleig at Purdue, I'm blanking again on the grad student who's lead author. If I had it in front of me, I could look it up. But their team came out with something that was topological data analysis on compute graphs. So when you're training models, you've got a compute graph. You can go in and do analysis to figure out what's going to work, what's not going to work before you do the training. And you can start to partition those data sets and figure out, again, what to throw out, what needs to be augmented, what needs to be fixed. So there's a lot of tools that are coming out just to label it's called graph topological data analysis. So GTDA and other kinds of quantitative tools. I think downstream, once you've got models, you can be using things like Weight Watcher. Are you familiar with like Charles Martin?
I'm not.
Yeah. So once you've trained a model, if you want to go in and understand what is really going on in a deep learning model, it's based on statistical mechanics and it's analysis of deep learning models to really go in and find out, like, okay, there are trouble spots here and there. There's stuff we really don't know what's going on over here, etc. But what I'm seeing is we have tooling, we have math to analyze the data, analyze the resulting models, and do something smart, rather than just saying, okay, here's a benchmark I have to beat. Why don't we go in and fix the benchmarks too? That's what I'm saying. And I think DPO, what's been happening on the leaderboards over the past couple of months is showing that, a team without GPUs can go back and take somebody else's training data, fix it, retrain the model, and beat everybody else. And like I say, Argula, Hugging Face, Snorkel, they've all done it. So, I know I don't want to harsh on people again all that much. I appreciate all the research that's coming out, but I think that what Andrew Ng is saying there is like, we need a data first strategy. Like, fix your data first before you burn up all the carbon. Because otherwise, if you're working from really bad training sets or really bad evals, it doesn't matter how much algorithmic work or how much training time you put into it. You're going to come out with crap.
Is this how well has this message been received? Because I mean, I'm hearing it loud and clear, and I think that's one of the stuff that we are super excited about, because we're like we're Tim and I, we're data people, right?
Yeah.
We're like, we're more data people than machine learning AI people in this case. I mean, for like creating models and stuff, and I take it to the next level. It's like Tim and I always argue, it's like we live in this data first world. I want it to be a knowledge first world, right? It's just not just clean data. It needs to be clean data with the meaning, with the semantics of the stuff.
Yeah. We don't just drink the Kool-Aid. We're evangelists for this, right? This is the world we want.
So, do you feel that we are headed in this direction, or is there still more?
I do.
Okay.
I think that the results are out there in public, and you're seeing really well-funded entities that are competing, and you're seeing less funded entities that are beating them. And I mean, it's a market. You have so much capital, right?
So this is then a call out to, now kind of want to shift the conversation a little bit from research and bring it into the real world and enterprise. It's like, well, one thing is that you can start like using all these models and stuff, but then the clear message is that you also need to start investing in having your data, cleaning your data, adding semantics to your data by focusing on a data first and like a knowledge first approach.
Right. And I think there's a long road ahead on this. I don't think it's just a matter of, we're going to clean up a couple of benchmarks that are popular. I think that this knowledge first approach, like you're saying, I think it's a very, very long road, because this is the way we get past the hurdles we're facing right now.
How do we shorten this? Because people like, this is an argument. It's like, oh yeah, we get it, but it's like so much investment, and then I'll throw money, I'll get some results, and that's good. But then we kind of we focus on the immediate, but know that in the long run that's going to affect. So how do we shorten? How do we get to that knowledge first faster?
It kills me. It doesn't make headlines. I mean, Sam Altman can talk about his race car, and it gets headlines, right? But like, people actually come up with a better strategy that's more cost effective and has better return on investment. And there's no headline, right? That just kills me.
I'm pausing because I'm like, I agree. I'm like,
where do we go from here? Well, I mean, I think the thing is that we have something that works. Drive it, make it work, prove it in the marketplace. I think this is a competitive advantage, and it's time for startups or industry that's taking advantage of this kind of technology, take it and run with it and beat out the competition. It's time to get aggressive. Maybe that's the best way to, if they're not going to take the message, beat them in the marketplace, and they'll probably listen eventually. Somebody will.
There you go. That's good advice. Paco, what do you see as the trends that are really impacting industry today? Like, especially things that are coming from the research community, but curious in general, like what do you see as the trends that are most impactful right now around this space?
Yeah, this is actually from a conversation Oscar and Paul started at lunch today with us because they were talking about their curriculums, because they're cranking out master students in AI, things like that. And they're like, what do we really need? What do you hire for that we're not providing? And there's a few of us, and we all said the same thing at the same time. We're like, ML ops. And they're like, no, really, what do you need? It's like, no, you need ML ops. You need people. I mean, the thing is, in corporate, HR usually sets what the hiring levels are. And anybody who's like ops, there's like a cap on their salary. And it's ridiculous because Meta is going to offer them probably, 50% or 100% or 200% more than where that cap is. And so corporates, the thing is, you could have the best data in the world, the best ML engineers, the best knowledge graph representation for your business. And you could have killer apps. But if you don't have ops people to run it 24/7, you're dead in the water before you start. And the thing is that what I see is in corporates right now, in industry which have revenue-bearing use cases, typically IT will take a look at what we're doing in knowledge graphs, whatever AI teams are doing, and say, hey, look, this stuff is out of our scope. We're not responsible. You want to run it? Go run it. Hire your own ops people. And so I see a lot of projects getting starved because they can't hire, triple shift ops staff to run the critical parts that they need. And it's not complete. I mean, MLOps is not easy. It's a hard job and it needs skills, but it's not rocket. I mean, it is rocket science, right? But it's not extreme rocket science. You can do this. The thing is, like, it's really actually fun. But the idea of understanding what's going on in machine learning, what are the security consequences, what are the compliance and legal consequences? Because you have to, as ops people, you're there running it. You need to interface with the governance committees. You need to interface as well with data science teams and apps people. So you really need to understand a lot of these perspectives, in addition to like observability and deployment and all the other stuff you would have. I think right now I'm really super interested in the communities of practice around MLOps because I've been involved in conferences a lot, industry conferences, obviously through O'Reilly and others. And what I see right now is the MLOps communities of practice are a really interesting nexus for bringing in a lot of different people. I mean, it's not just ops people there. It's like ML engineers, it's like researchers, there's product managers, there's just a whole range of different people who are there because they're like, oh, okay, this is important. This is interesting. I need to be there. Hey, maybe I'll hire some people. And I love going to those kind of events. And so, there's a few of them that I think are really good, especially that I could recommend and call out. But I've been trying to get involved in this kind of community because I see it as certainly a pain point for our biggest customers, but it's what we talked about at lunch today. It's like the thing that's missing from these like AI masters programs. It's like, great. You're doing really well on the machine learning side of it. Do you know how to use GitHub? Even like, have you ever built a Docker container? Do you know what the word observability? Have you ever worked with Datadog? Like we can go down the list of like maybe just some basic skills so that when you get the job, they can train you for the rest of it.
Do you feel like the area of ML ops that a lot of the best practices have been surfaced, and it's a matter of just making sure that we're properly educating people, disseminating that, or do you feel like there's a lot we're still figuring out as an industry?
It's pretty grassroots. To me, it feels like data science circa 2013, 2014, because we were just getting together and like circulating best practices. Like nobody had really even written the books yet. But there were some good talks that people could use as kind of like guideposts. But other than that, people go to meetups and like trade ideas. And I think we're really at that stage right now. But the other side is that there are some natural guardrails to this because when you get into a corporation, how they handle their single sign-on, how they handle their roles-based access control, these kind of concerns, it's pretty well documented, right? They have an opinionative way of doing it. So there's a lot of things that you will learn on the job that probably won't be done anywhere else. But believe me, there are people there who know how to do it. So be ready to learn and understand these processes and where this stuff just doesn't fit and how you have to be the glue. How do you deploy to the internal app store, right? Because that's where the users are. I could go on and on. I think that where we're at, this is actually something the breakout group that Oscar's leading. This is actually some stuff we've been talking about, is like, how can we bring this kind of practice into software engineering for knowledge graphs and really start to articulate what are some best practices. So okay, this is what we've been talking about. I'm referencing.
Well, just to give folks more context, I mean, Paco and I are at this seminar here on where knowledge graphs are going in the future, and we've had all these breakout groups, and a report will be written, will be published soon about what we're doing. But so it's fascinating. I don't know all the details of what you've been doing in your group because I've been on another group right now.
Your group is amazing. We need to talk about your group too.
Well, but this is fascinating because one thing that comes to mind right now is a lot of the organizations that we work with, right? They all are hungry to go do AI, but not everybody is mature and ready for it. And from one perspective, like not even their data is ready for that. That's one thing. Yeah. Second, you see a lot of people talking to like, now they see ChatGPT and they think it's magic. So they're like, oh, I want ChatGPT to talk to my data now, right? I'm expecting that type of stuff.
I need more.
So actually,
you're
so that's one thing. But then also the other aspect is like, you don't even have these infrastructures are ready for this. So how much are we actually setting ourselves up for success or failure because there's all these foundational infrastructures, roles, I mean, data, but then the board is talking about we need AI, right?
Yeah.
So how do we call BS on where we are today, on the expectations of where we are and need to be, and just lay out the reality?
Well, Ben Lorick and I do a lot of work together. You've been talking to Ben recently too. This is something we tried to take head on in about like circa 2018. We did a series of mini books and industry surveys and analysis. And what we found out is like MIT Sloan and HBR and like McKinsey Global and others were doing similar projects. So we just sort of like summarized and coalesced it. And what it comes out to is you can think of like a survival analysis, because, okay, here's our funnel. And at the top, the problem is there are executives who they don't want to hear about AI. Well, they do. They want to hear about ChatGPT. But as far as like the application you need to deploy to like calculate your supply network contingency, they don't want to hear about that. They just want ChatGPT. Right? So up at the top, you've got executives who are probably pretty senior, and they probably grew up on things like Six Sigma. And people are saying that, hey, in production, we're using, probabilistic kinds of methods for machine learning. They're like, no, I don't want to hear that. I just want ChatGPT. And seriously, last year from like February 2023 to like August 2023, around the world, a lot of top executives were playing with ChatGPT. It wasn't until Q4 started to loom that like a lot of projects got turned back on because executives needed to file progress reports. So they really were like playing with ChatGPT for 6 months or 7 months, right? Mm-hmm. And drooling over the fact of like, maybe I could have a super intelligence and like fire a third of my staff. And no, that's not going to happen. So when you go back to like what we were looking at 5-6 years ago, and all the analysis coming from a lot of high-powered sources, the story was this: at the top, there are executives who just don't want to hear it; they're disconnected. And then down below that, the next tranche of like where you run into survival hazard is that it's really hard for these companies to hire enough people who are basically product managers. They get the business, they understand the business, they can carry the ball through to make a business unit successful, but they also understand where the technology is, how that can be deployed, how they can really work with their engineers, with their data people, et cetera, to build the thing that needs to be done. And so hiring those kind of people, that product layer is just difficult. There's just not enough of those people out there. And I'm hopeful that they will be there. I think that a lot of people are recognizing and growing into those kind of roles, but it's just really tough.
I want to throw the ball here to Tim, because Tim is, as you say, is always a customer guy, but he's really a product guy at heart.
Yeah, awesome.
Sure. Yeah, no, I mean that resonates a lot. Cheers. We see that, everywhere, right? We see it in data, we see it in governance.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously it connects to AI and ML as well, right? This, somebody who both understands the business side of it and how to get things done, as well as the technology, right? They can't be unversed in the technology or else they won't be able to navigate it. And then on top of that, they need to be somebody who can really work directly with the team. And so there doesn't seem to be enough of these people, and they're hard. They're kind of, more of that unicorn type person. There's not enough of them.
But hey, I mean, if you're really, you get the tech, but maybe you're working in, I don't know, content marketing or some area that's in tech, but you want to get a promotion, go out and work on that. Like, go back to school, get the product management jobs, work in some roles, and take it on head first, because it's a really great opportunity, I think.
That's it. That's great advice right there. I think, we need more product managers.
Who get it.
So I think another aspect, kind of connecting to the previous conversation, is on the ops side, right? So we also need folks who can do ML ops.
Yeah, that clearly, and this is probably part of the distortion of the big tech companies hiring like crazy, although of course that's backed off. But then also just corporates, HR is like 15 years out of date. So usually it's a matter of like, HR just doesn't really understand that this whole landscape has changed. And here's a really competitive role that we absolutely need to staff yesterday. And no, we're not going to pay them $80,000 a year. That's the message that needs to come across, and it needs executive air cover before that's going to change.
So is it really something specific to ML ops, or is it more kind of a broader ops in general? Maybe I'm just by saying this, I'm like, maybe you're spreading yourself too thin, so that's why you just specialize. But because you have we talk a lot about data ops, right? And ML ops. And at the end, if it's really a data first to knowledge first approach, that data is going to feed into not just those models, it's going to feed into also the dashboards, the reporting, whatever application. So it's like, there should really be a whole strategy coming together. And I think, Tim, you and I talk all about with our colleagues and executives we work with, is like, what is your data strategy? What is your AI strategy? These stuffs that all go together and obviously connect. It should just be one strategy altogether. Right?
Yeah.
So what do you think? Is it really focused on being ML ops, or is it more of a broader ops? Or
I'm almost thinking of ML ops as just like, it's a label, it's a principal component. I can use that as a placeholder and access a lot of people in their focus right now. But 2 years from now, it might be a completely different label, but we know what it is, right? And what it's really called, and really what the best practices are, is not defined yet. That's where we're in progress. So I agree. It's going to be much more of like a data first, knowledge first thing. And the operational side of it is actually understanding what your business is. We were talking earlier that was kind of like the role of the data scientist, to be ethnographer for the business and understand what are the mechanisms and let's measure it. But no, it's actually operations is where you're doing the thing for the customer.
Now, this is so. All right, because we're taking notes here. We have all our takeaways. But
I should say the other hazard that shows up that's really big is data availability and data quality, right? Because I think we both heard a talk. I'm not going to pick on anybody. We heard a talk earlier today about how corporates have spent the past 10 years getting all of their data understood, and it's all carefully aligned in data lakes now, and you can just go get all of it. And it's like, no, you can't. No, there's mergers and acquisitions, and every time that happens, it completely gets jumbled. So that is the other problem, is even in companies that invest in really big data lakes, and I could pick on a few, but I'm not going to. They probably own 3 or 4 of the major competitors in that space, and they still can't get a hold of the data they need to do the work that we need to do with them.
It's a huge challenge. There's so many different data sources and data technologies, and the rate of change is too quick, and any company of significant size is really struggling to keep up. That kind of begs a larger question here of, some of the companies that we talk to are trying to figure out the approach to really take advantage of ML and AI, and they're trying to decide between should I create a special island of data that we preserve and make special that we can really do this on? Or do we really focus a lot on, let's just hurry up and modernize and get that data lake, in better shape? I think folks are really struggling with the trade-offs around how to prepare.
If you don't understand your data catalog, if you don't understand your metadata, if you don't understand where your data is being produced, and data is not a static thing. You have a business, it's ongoing. There's data exhaust all the time, probably. And if you don't understand your catalog and what's going on, what you can leverage, because the thing is, when you really get in and start doing the machine learning, you find out, hey, there's some other signals over there. We really need them. And this could take us from 80% to 95%. And we need to bring in that data. How can we get it? They're not letting us. Or nobody understands it. Or like the person who did this retired and they didn't bother to document or something like that. I mean, I've heard these. I think the case study out of Lyft that a friend of mine who ended up like leaving Lyft and starting stemma.org, the case study that they found there was when they started doing an internal data catalog of what their data scientists were using. What they found immediately was like their data science teams, like 250 people at Lyft, which is, you look at the loaded salary per year, that's a hefty investment. And they were spending about roughly 25% of their time rediscovering the catalog over and over on every project. And when they put a catalog in front of them, they're like, windfall.
Yeah.
Look at,
So I mean, these are the stories that we work with all the time too. And I'm just curious to get your advice for folks listening is, I mean, in this we started this conversation on like hardcore, what is the latest stuff going on in research and translated it, right? And then going off like on Hugging Face and all. We've gone into like, we started this really hardcore research, and then we're like, wait, but then also we need to have ops, right? We start talking about the ops stuff, and then we're like going back, and then we're like going back and like, I can't find my data, and we need a catalog. And it's like, and it's like, so you're telling us we gotta go back to basics. I mean, we gotta have like the basics foundations in place. So what is your recommendation? You speak to so many people, you work with so many people. Like, what is your recommendation right now? It's this is the strategy. Like, you need to be able to get from here to from A to B. What do you tell people?
Well, I mean, I think you can start out. Maybe you can bootstrap. You don't have to like boil the ocean the first day, right? You can bootstrap by just starting to understand for the apps that are critical for you, what is the data that's going into it? Like, where are you getting it? And then number two, like, so basically, who's using it and why? And then number two, who's producing that? Do you know that product manager? Do they even know that you exist? Like, can you go out and have coffee with that product manager and say, hey, your stuff is cool. We want to help you. Is there anything we can do to make sure that this keeps moving smoothly? And by the way, we know 3 other people in the same boat. Just start taking kind of even just a real simplistic consumer producer view of that, and start building our catalog from there, because those are going to be kind of priority based, right? And I guarantee for most enterprise, once you do that, you're going to have a lot of surprises, and you'll probably need to call your SVP in to like resolve some things. Just my take.
Who should be doing that work, you said?
Yeah, that's it. I mean, I think that, again, business unit managers should be shielding it, but at some point you need to get exec cover, because you're crossing across divisions, probably, if it's anything useful. I mean, I hope there's some data from customer support, but I hope there's also some data from production and probably some data from sales. You're crossing a lot of lines, and you really want exec air cover, right? Because if you don't, people are going to shoot you down. So you need to get the attention of somebody who really matters, who can come in and say, no, this is what we're doing. And if you can't get that, seriously, shake your network, find a better place to be.
that's the honest no BS there. Right? Tim, do you want to? Time is flying by, and we're gonna keep going.
I know.
Any your final comments, thoughts?
I'll ask just one last question before we move to our lightning round, which is that, we talked about a couple of different trends today, including and especially around ML ops and the importance around that. Any other trends that you would point out as like, hey, like listeners, folks, you got to pay attention to this. This is some of the stuff that's changing a lot over the last couple of months here.
Yeah, that's a great one. Okay, so I do think, I mean, we talked also about data first strategy or knowledge first strategy, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. This is also really crucial. And it's a counterfactual to a lot of what's in the headlines. So that's why I think it's so important. But also, I do think that there are really interesting communities of practice, and you need to get involved with them. And even if your head's down in a corporation, you still need to like understand and have some kind of input, right? Because you're not going to wait until you like read this in a Gartner report, because by then it's going to be way too late. So if it even shows up in a Gartner report. So I think, go out and get involved with communities of practice. And I think there's a lot of benefit. That's a two-way street. And it's a great way to also understand like who in your organization might really resonate with this kind of role and want to move into it, right? And promote within as well. So I think those are maybe 3 or 4 things that people could take away as kind of like overarching narratives here.
So let's head to our lightning round.
Okay, cool.
All right. So first one. So you mentioned Andrew Ng's good comment about data first. We talked a little about knowledge first, and you mentioned it's been a long road. Will this become a mainstream in, let's say, 5 years?
I think it's shorter.
Oh,
I mean, I take a look at the timelines of like when the ideas of data science and data products was what it was being called back then. I can remember like DJ Patil did a talk about data products and took off like fire. But I mean, that sort of catalyzed, I mean, obviously these things, data analytics was going on a lot longer before, but it really catalyzed circa 2009. And I don't think that it was really mainstream until maybe 5 years later. There's this thing that we have called J-curves when we look at technology adoption. Have you ever?
J-curves.
Yeah, there's usually about it's maybe 12 to 15 year between them when there's a couple of people who are doing a weird thing and it works for them to like, they talk to some other people and there's a period of time before like the ginormous corporation that never does anything early is like putting it in a white paper for all their customers. There's about a 15-year span usually on average. And so, where am I going with this? How do we think it's going to hit within 5 years? I think it'll be sooner, because when we do look at how data science was adopted, you get past the early adopters probably clearly within like 4 to 5 years. But I think that for the people in the know and seeing return on investment by people who are doing it right, that'll come much earlier. That's usually like 2 to 3 years out. And I think when people are, looking at the proposition of like doing more smaller specialized models, doing a lot of RAG, doing a lot of fine tuning, whatever, they're burning a lot of money, right? These GPU instances in the cloud are not cheap. No. And I mean, you're a manager, you have a budget, you could hire people or you could burn up GPUs. And if you find out that your competitors are doing something a lot better as far as that cloud budget, and they're hiring better people as a consequence and making more efficient budgets, I don't think that takes 5 years to propagate.
That is a fantastic insight right there, because you can say if you don't invest in data and knowledge up front, right, you're going to be spending more compute on doing stuff that's not going to work as well, right?
Yeah.
And then your competitors who will be doing that, they will be getting there faster, spending less money in compute. They'll be able to go hire more people. They're going to go beat you. So
yeah.
So the call here is go invest in high quality data and semantics and knowledge.
Yeah.
Before somebody else beats you over the head with it.
This stuff isn't cheap, and make the investments, and you're going to save a lot of money in the long run.
Like so excited, like I can make this investment now. I can spend this money right now, and GPUs like no. How about you spend that money like prepping in your foundations, which you may not feel like you have an immediate return, but it's like that thing is just going to compile more over and over again.
And I mean, you look at how much you're spending on GPUs, and then take how much of a fraction of that would be to hire a product manager at large who's reporting to an exec to actually try to ferret out where are these problems, and let's at least get a plan.
So this is fantastic. Like we could like this conversation is making me realize that we should have like I'd love to sit down, write something. I think it's probably actually going to come up. It's probably going to come out of the summer coming here about like the argument that you should be investing in product managers that's focusing on semantics and knowledge.
You should be investing in data and people. Well, people and data.
Right. Yeah, there's a bigger picture here in terms of return on investment.
Yes.
Right.
Tim,
all right. Second question. So you mentioned machine learning talent and best practices and communities of practice. Can ML ops be solved with technology? Like how much of it can be a technology problem?
No. It's a person problem, I think. Part of it is just that it's an evolving landscape, rapidly evolving. You need to have people who are committed, who number one, like their job and want to do better in it. And number two, they understand the business. And number three, everything's rapidly evolving underneath them. So they need to be keeping up on their skills. So, I mean, to come in and say that like, you're going to buy a magical vendor that like solves all these problems. No. This is a people problem.
All right. I'm happily surprised with that answer, because I mean, I feel a lot when it comes to like the ops, it's always like tools and more tools.
I know. Buy our platform.
I mean, there are a lot of interesting tools there, and Yeah,
Yeah, there
I
are.
know one of our customers is using like Dataku, for example, to wire a lot of stuff. But there's people in process and stuff, and things change rapidly, right?
Oh man, the amount of emails I get every day right now on just some vendors saying like, "Oh, anyways, I don't want to throw anything," but yeah,
End to end data ops pipeline, right?
that will increase this one. Okay, anyways, well, I don't. We're vendors. We understand this whole part.
Yeah.
Okay, anyways, next question: is the catalog part of the AI stack?
Oh God, yeah. I mean, it's foundational. It's absolutely foundational, right? Because if you do not understand, if you can't get a comprehensive picture of what's going on in your data, in your business, where do you go? I mean, what are you doing?
Perfect.
I
This is music to my ears, obviously.
I wish I could underscore. I mean, I want to jump up and down and say that, but I wish I could underscore that more. But I mean, it's a simple message. I mean, if you do not have data availability and understanding of things like data quality and like also who to talk to, who are you really partnering with inside your company, and understand that people aspect of it. If you don't understand that, but yet you're basing your business on the results of that data, I mean, we know how this story ends, and it's not pretty.
Mhm.
Tim, take us away with the final lightning round.
All right. Final question. We discussed the need for product managers. What would be, in your opinion, better? Taking a product person and trying to immerse them in the sort of machine learning and AI and operations side of things, or somebody who's immersed in machine learning and AI and help them become a product person?
I mean, having been a manager and a manager of managers, my question would be a little bit different. I'd like to find out who the people are who are curious and somewhat hungry. And I think you could go either route, but unless the person's really got it inside themselves to go after this, it's not going to happen. So I think there's a lot of great ways for somebody who's not an expert in machine learning to start picking it up and really understand, like, what does this technology do? It's not complete and utter magic, right? And I think it's not a long learning curve to really get a feel for, like, how can we, what are some case studies? How can we apply this in business? So I think that can be acquired if you are a product manager and you know that role and you want to learn more about what's going on in contemporary and machine learning. Definitely, that can go. But the other way
I think
around is also
that's
really
great
good.
advice. Yeah, that's great advice because I do think that some folks who either are product people or maybe more business folks, right? They look at what's going on around AI and ML and they're like, oh my gosh, this is magic. This is black box. I don't understand. Right. But they do understand some around data. And, they probably actually do have the curiosity and the hunger, as you mentioned. So, if you're
Yeah.
listening and you're feeling intimidated, don't be. Dive in.
Yeah, no, one of my favorite examples, I had a friend who'd, come out of being a lieutenant in the Army, and he knew how to manage people in real critical situations, but he really liked tech, and he's like, I'm going to dive into this. And I mean, those are the kind of people skills, that's the kind of motivation you need, and the rest of it you can pick up.
Mhm.
All right, takeaway time. Tim, take us away with takeaways.
All right. Well, we kicked this all off around the honest no BS around taking open source innovation and trying to translate it into the real world, and what are the problems around that, right? And you kind of started off by saying, well, there's a lot really going on around AI in general, of course, but especially in the open source community and the research community. There's a lot that's going on there, and it's very exciting. And one thing that's been really good to see is how much of maybe some of the previous hesitancy around really bringing research and putting it out there. A lot of that hesitancy has gone away, which is really, really important. And there's also a really tight loop now, driven by all the innovation that's happening, the fast changes that are going on, also the partnerships between the research community and industry. There's actually a really fast and close iterative loop going on right now between research and the use of that research, which is great. And hopefully that really continues. And AI has really been pushing that. The speed of AI is moving so fast. If you want to innovate in AI, machine learning, knowledge graph, you need to look at what's happening in that research side of things, because there's a lot happening there, a lot change, and a lot of it can translate into the real world. But you put up an important and big caution here, which is that there's a few things that are not going right with this. One of them is, for example, the reproducibility, which is not there enough, and more work needs to go there, which might be okay for an academic student, but not okay for a well-funded institution. And you mentioned also bad behavior like chasing benchmarks, right? And we really need to look at not just the benchmark itself, but how could or not just doing better in the benchmark, but can you improve the benchmark? Look at the underlying data, right? Look at the underlying tooling, right? And you mentioned, for example, DPO, direct preference optimization, and some of the different tools that are coming out of Hugging Face to measure the data, training sets, benchmarks, evals,
model cards for
yeah,
things like that. Yeah.
Exactly. And the thing that I wrote down in my notes in bold was we need to have a more holistic approach and thought process around the full data to AI chain. And so not just kind of thinking about one piece of it or just the performance piece or just the training piece. You got to look end to end and think about, hey, it's maybe it's not even a chain. It's more like it's more like a pyramid. And you got to look at the foundational aspects, not just what's on top.
Yeah.
So I thought that there was some really good takeaways there. Juan, what about you? What were your big takeaways?
So I'm really happy we connected on the whole data first, knowledge first, and said it's going to be a long road. And like one of the things that frustrates us is these when it's successful, you have a successful data first, knowledge first approach. That doesn't get the headlines, right? But at the end of the day, like, you know what? We just need to go focus and just win. Like, show how we are beating the competition, be successful because we invested in data and knowledge first. I think that we just go drive that. And we got to be doers here. What are the latest trends today? Well, the one that you're highlighting a lot is that we need these ML ops, right? We need to have. You can have the best ML engineers, you can have the best knowledge graph, the best apps, but you need to be able to have these ops toolings and the talents. Otherwise, you will fail. You have to deal with all these security, legal, and governance consequences and pushing things to production.
And I should footnote that I don't mean drop everything and only devote yourself to MLOps. It's like if you're in software engineering, cool, that's extremely important. Pick up some ML ops as well, and you will become. I mean, by definition, you start to become that unicorn.
And it's really interesting is that there's all these communities of practice around MLOps and stuff, right? So much to be done there, but it's still grassroots, right? Kind of similar to what data science was in early 2010. So I think we're kind of changing a lot and growing together as a community here. That data first strategy and the knowledge first strategy, I love how we were just talking briefly, is like you can go invest so much and spend your money on GPUs and all that money in compute, but you can also be spending on making sure you're doing your data very well, and then you can actually have more people that you can go hire around that. And then connecting all this to the enterprise is like, how do we set ourselves up for success? One, be careful about like if executives are just hearing they just want ChatGPT and so forth. Be careful with they're too disconnected from the reality. It is hard to hire people who are product managers. That's one of the things, and we need to understand the business and the technology with the team. Again, we talked about ML ops, and one of those things is that it's hard to go hire them because it's a competitive role. The HR is also out of date about this stuff, and also it may be it's a placeholder, right? This name can change and so forth, right? At the end, we talk about data availability and catalog is still an issue. If you don't understand your catalog, your metadata, well, that is a problem. And we wrapped up with your strategy recommendation. One of my favorite quotes always is, don't boil the ocean, and just go find those critical apps in your organization. Go find how the data gets there, what goes in it, what depends on that. Go find the product managers behind that. Go have coffee with them saying, hey, we want to go support you guys and how do you do this? Seriously. And then build a catalog from there. But it's really important. You need exec air cover because you're crossing boundaries. And if you don't get it, then start shaking your network and go find the next place because you want to be in a place that's going to succeed.
Right.
How did we do?
Awesome.
Cheers. This is all you. Wrap it up. 3 questions. Okay. What's your advice? Who should we invite next? And what resources do you follow?
Advice. What's my advice? Wow.
About data, about life, about whatever you want.
Okay. Well, it's my birthday. Wow. I need water. Yeah, no, it's my birthday.
By the way, that was a big clock right now. If you heard the background, so you survived your birthday.
Okay, no, it's no longer my birthday. No, okay. So full disclosure, I'm in my 60s. I write code every day. I love it. I have gone in my career all the way up to being CTO and board member for 2 different publicly traded tech firms. And I really hated it because of all the lawsuits and crap that goes on. But I mean, that's like penny stocks. That's the problem. But I've gone through different roles, been in different exec staff. I've been in high flying startups. I've been in low-flying startups as well, right? I've seen a lot of disasters, but I've been through a lot of roles, and I've really enjoyed doing sales engineering. I really enjoyed going in and closing a deal. But at the end of the day, in my 60s, I love writing code. So I would just say, damn it, figure out what you like, get a lot of background because it's going to come in handy. Keep going at it, right? I mean, a lot of people say that you should spend 5-10 years being a programmer and then become a manager and work your way up. And it's so much bullshit. If you're good at what you're doing, do it and figure out what's even better next.
I love this advice.
Good advice.
You get your honest, no BS spirit right there.
Okay, good. Trying to be true to the form.
All right, who should we invite next?
Okay, so we were talking about communities of practice. There's a few people there. One of them I would highly recommend. There's a guy named Demetrios Brinkman, and he is running a thing called MLOps.community, and it's worldwide. There's chapters, meetups in real life all around. He's actually based close to here, I think in Frankfurt. But I mean, there's people. It's global, right? It's all virtual, and there's a conference coming up, Feb 15. I helped with a lot of speakers. It'll be Feb 15 and Feb 22. It's free, but I would say he's got a real finger on the pulse from a broad spectrum of this, right? Grill him, get his no BS take.
Awesome. That's great.
Great idea.
Cool.
Finally, what resources do you follow?
Wow.
From people, from blogs, from LinkedIn, from magazines.
Yeah, cool. Okay, so one thing that I follow religiously is Team Camry. It's a security vulnerability analysis. Comes across usually about 10, 12 items per day, but summaries of top vulnerabilities or top attacks, just the security space. I used to work in security, and I really want to keep a hand in it because it's so important and so much is going on. And it's also our customers care about that, right? So I really watch the security space because it's so strange and it evolves so quickly. Another one I listen to is actually Geopolitics is War on the Rocks. It's $150 a year for a subscription, but I love it. Some of it's out of Austin at the business school, I think. But other parts are out of DC. But it's like a bipartisan, non-denominational, let's look at what's happening in the world, but from a military perspective. I used to be in the military. I've done a lot of work for DoD. So, those are things that are important for me to get perspective on understanding what's going on. I'm also on Hugging Face all the time, and I love the new papers, and I go through and do a lot of cataloging on my own to put together collections of here's papers of things that are emerging, because there are really great AI tools on Hugging Face. Here's my collection. What am I missing, right? Mm-hmm. Go out and find the lookalikes and recommend to me a reading list. And I use that for a lot of Bootstrap, but I also just look at what their top summaries are and what's in the leaderboards and what's interesting. So those are probably my three biggest things, other than I don't really read US media as much. I actually read The Guardian, the UK version, and it just kind of gives me a little bit better worldview of things. So that's me.
All right. Well, just quick reminder, next week we have Eva and Harya. We're going to be talking a lot about kind of the state of VCs and startups and investing and its up and down time. But with that, Paco, thank you so much. This is fantastic. As always, thanks to World who lets us do this every Wednesday. And with that, cheers.
Cheers. Cheers. Thank you so much.